What you're about to hear is the complete story of how a routine shopping trip on a Saturday afternoon in March 2023 became a flashpoint for racial profiling, corporate accountability, and a $1.9 million settlement that would end one woman's career and validate another's dignity. This is the story of Vanessa Chen, a 38-year-old senior policy analyst for the Seattle City Council, who walked into a Nordstrom department store in downtown Seattle with her own purse and walked out 2 hours later with a police escort, a trauma response that would last months, and eventually, a settlement that would make national headlines. This is also the story of Karen Whitmore, a 52-year-old store manager with a 14-year tenure at Nordstrom and a complaint file thick enough to warrant its own banker's box. 17 formal complaints in 6 years. That's not bad luck. That's not a series of misunderstandings. That's a pattern so clear, it should have been addressed years before Vanessa Chen ever set foot in that store. By the time this was over, Whitmore would be terminated, Nordstrom would issue a public apology, the Seattle City Council would launch an inquiry into retail profiling practices, and Vanessa Chen would testify before a packed chamber about what it means to be presumed guilty in your own city while carrying your own belongings. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to where it started. Vanessa Chen didn't wake up that morning expecting to become a headline. She woke up expecting to buy a birthday gift for her mother, maybe grab lunch, maybe enjoy one of the first warm Saturdays of the year. She had no idea that by 2:47 p.m., she'd be standing in a security office, shaking, trying to explain to 3 people why the purse on her shoulder belonged to her. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If you're in the US, Canada, the UK, or anywhere else, drop your location in the comments. And if stories about accountability and justice matter to you, hit that subscribe button. We post 3 times a week. Let's get into it. Downtown Seattle on a Saturday in March is a specific kind of alive. The rain has finally broken after weeks of gray, and the sun, when it appears, feels like a small miracle. Pine Street fills with tourists and locals, the smell of coffee and salt water mixing in the air that blows up from the waterfront. People walk slower. They stop to look in windows. They take their time. The Nordstrom flagship store sits on the corner of Pine and 6th, 7 floors of glass and steel and carefully curated aspiration. It's not the kind of place you just wander into. It's a destination. The cosmetics floor gleams under recessed lighting. The handbag section, tucked into a corner near the escalators, features displays that look more like art installations than retail shelves. Bags perch on white pedestals. Price tags are discreet, almost apologetic. The staff wear black. The customers wear everything. On March 18, 2023, at approximately 2:30 p.m., the store was moderately busy. Not packed, but steady. Spring break crowds, a few tourists, plenty of locals taking advantage of the weather to browse indoors before heading back outside. The handbag section had maybe 6 or 7 people in it at any given time. A sales associate named Marcus was helping a couple decide between 2 leather totes. Another associate, Jennifer, was restocking a display near the back wall. And Karen Whitmore, the manager on duty, was watching the floor from her usual position near the registers. Whitmore had worked at this location since 2009, 14 years. Long enough to know the layout by heart, to recognize regular customers, to spot the seasonal workers who wouldn't last past the holidays. She prided herself on her vigilance. She'd tell you that herself. She'd say she had an eye for trouble, a sense for when something was off. She'd say she was protecting the store, protecting the brand, doing her job. What she wouldn't tell you, what she probably couldn't see, was that her vigilance had a pattern, and that pattern had been documented, filed, and ignored for years. Vanessa Chen grew up in Bellevue, a suburb just east of Seattle, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who ran a small accounting firm out of a strip mall office on 148th Avenue. Her father, David, had been an engineer in Taipei before emigrating in 1981. Her mother, Susan, had been a teacher. In the U.S., they rebuilt. They worked. They saved. They sent both their daughters to college without loans. Vanessa was the younger daughter, the driven one, the one who brought home perfect report cards and spent Friday nights studying while her friends went to parties. She graduated from the University of Washington in 2007 with a degree in public policy and a minor in urban planning. She spent a year working for a nonprofit that focused on affordable housing advocacy, then went back to school for a master's degree from the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. She graduated in 2010 with honors and a thesis on equitable zoning practices that would later be cited in Seattle City Council meetings. By 2023, at 38, Vanessa was a senior policy analyst for the Seattle City Council, specializing in housing equity and land use. She'd worked on 3 major housing initiatives, including a tenant protection ordinance that passed in 2021 and an inclusionary zoning framework that was still being debated. Her colleagues described her as meticulous, patient, and brilliant at translating complex policy into language that resonated with the public. She testified before the council regularly. She'd been quoted in the Seattle Times, The Stranger, and KUOW. She'd won a Public Service Award from the Washington State Bar Association in 2022 for her work on tenant rights. She was respected. She was credentialed. She was accomplished. She was not someone who stole purses. On March 18, 2023, Vanessa had the day off. Her mother's 65th birthday was coming up the following week, and Vanessa wanted to get her something special. Susan Chen loved handbags. She collected them, not obsessively, but lovingly. She had a small shelf in her bedroom devoted to the bags she'd accumulated over the years, each one a memory, a milestone, a gift. There was the vintage Chanel her daughters had pooled their money to buy her for her 60th birthday. There was the Kate Spade she'd purchased herself after closing a major client deal in 2015. There was the simple leather tote David had given her on their 30th wedding anniversary, worn at the handles but still perfectly functional. Vanessa had been saving for months to buy her mother a designer bag, something her mother would never buy for herself. Something that said, "Thank you for the sacrifices, thank you for the support, thank you for teaching me that I deserve to take up space in the world." She left her apartment in Capitol Hill at 1:45 p.m., took the light rail downtown, and walked the 4 blocks to Nordstrom. She was wearing jeans, a white button-down shirt, a navy blazer, and white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She carried a black leather crossbody bag, a Coach bag she'd bought 3 years earlier, which held her wallet, her phone, her keys, a lipstick, and a pack of gum. She entered Nordstrom through the Pine Street entrance at 2:03 p.m. She took the escalator to the 2nd floor, where the handbag section was located. She spent the next 30 minutes browsing, looking at price tags, asking Jennifer, the sales associate, a few questions about leather care and warranty policies. She picked up a Saint Laurent bag, put it down. She examined a Celine tote, admired the stitching, decided it wasn't right. She texted her sister a photo of a Lou bag and asked for her opinion. At 2:36 p.m., she was standing near a display of Gucci bags, holding her phone in one hand and adjusting the strap of her own crossbody bag with the other. That's when Karen Whitmore started watching her. Vanessa didn't notice at first. She was focused on the bags, on her phone, on deciding whether the Gucci Marmont would be too trendy or just trendy enough. She didn't notice Whitmore standing 20 feet away, arms crossed, eyes locked on her. She didn't notice Whitmore walking closer, pausing, watching her pick up a bag and put it down. She didn't notice until Whitmore was standing right next to her. Karen Whitmore started at Nordstrom in 2009, hired as a sales associate in women's shoes. She was 38 at the time, recently divorced, looking for stable work with benefits. She was good at sales. She knew how to read customers, how to make small talk, how to close. She moved up quickly. By 2011, she was a department supervisor. By 2014, she was an assistant manager. By 2017, she was a full manager, overseeing multiple departments and a staff of 32 people. She was efficient, she met her sales targets, she kept her department organized, and she filed a lot of incident reports. Between 2017 and 2023, Karen Whitmore was named in 17 formal complaints filed by customers with Nordstrom's corporate office. 17. Not generic complaints about long wait times or out-of-stock items. Specific complaints about profiling, about being followed, about being accused of theft without cause. 12 of those complaints were filed by Black customers. 3 were filed by Latino customers. 1 was filed by a South Asian customer. 1 was filed by a Middle Eastern customer. The pattern was clear. The documentation was there. And yet, Whitmore remained in her position. Let's talk about a few of those complaints. In June 2018, a Black woman named Tanya Roberts filed a complaint after Whitmore followed her through the shoe department for 15 minutes, then asked to see the contents of her shopping bag, which contained shoes she'd purchased at a different store earlier that day. Roberts had her receipt. Whitmore apologized, said it was store policy, said she was just doing her job. The complaint was noted. Whitmore received a verbal warning. In November 2019, a Latino man named Carlos Mendoza filed a complaint after Whitmore stopped him at the exit and demanded to see a receipt for a jacket he was wearing. The jacket was his. He'd owned it for 2 years. He'd walked into the store wearing it. Whitmore insisted she'd seen him take it from a rack. Security footage proved otherwise. Mendoza was issued an apology gift card. Whitmore received a written warning and was required to attend a diversity training seminar. In March 2021, a black man named Darnell Hughes filed a complaint after Whitmore accused him of using a fraudulent credit card. Hughes was a software engineer at Amazon. He was buying a suit for his brother's wedding. His credit card was legitimate. His ID matched. Whitmore insisted the signature didn't match, called security, and refused to process the transaction until a supervisor intervened. Hughes left without the suit and with a promise from Nordstrom Corporate that the issue would be addressed. Whitmore received a final written warning, and yet, 2 years later, she was still on the floor. Here's what Nordstrom would later say in their defense. Whitmore was a longtime employee with an otherwise strong record. She'd never been accused of overt discrimination. She'd completed multiple trainings. Her managers believed she could improve. Here's what the complaint said. She couldn't. Do you think managers with multiple profiling complaints should be removed from customer-facing roles? Drop your answer below. Vanessa was looking at a black Gucci Marmont bag when Karen Whitmore approached her. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the counter and come with me to the office." Vanessa looked up. She didn't recognize Whitmore. She assumed there was some kind of mistake, some confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" "That purse. I need to see a receipt for that purse." This is when Vanessa looked down at her own bag, the black Coach crossbody she'd been carrying all day, and realized what was happening. "This is my purse. I walked in with it." Whitmore's expression didn't change. Her arms were crossed. Her voice was flat, controlled, the kind of tone that leaves no room for negotiation. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. We have a zero-tolerance policy for theft, and I've been watching you. This is where confusion becomes alarm. This is where a routine shopping trip becomes something else entirely. You've been watching me shop for 10 minutes. This purse has been on my shoulder the entire time. I'm calling security. You can either cooperate now, or we can make this a lot more difficult." Vanessa felt her pulse quicken. She looked around. A few other customers had stopped browsing. They were watching now. Jennifer, the sales associate, was standing near the back wall, frozen. Marcus, the other associate, had his phone out. "I would love for you to call security. Please do. I'd also love to see this supposed footage of me stealing my own property." Whitmore pulled her radio from her belt and called for security. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Security to handbags. Possible theft in progress. Need backup." Vanessa's hands were shaking now. She could feel the eyes on her, the weight of the accusation. She thought about walking out. She thought about just leaving, going home, forgetting this ever happened. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the injustice of it. Maybe it was the fact that she knew if she left, Whitmore would win, would confirm her own assumptions, would never have to confront what she'd done. So Vanessa stayed. 2 security guards arrived within minutes. They were both white men, both in their 30s, both wearing the standard Nordstrom security uniform, black polo shirts, black pants, radios on their belts. One of them, later identified as Derek Paulson, asked Whitmore what the issue was. "She's carrying a bag without a receipt. I've been watching her. She didn't purchase it here." Vanessa interrupted before Paulson could respond. "This is my bag. I walked into the store with it. I have owned this bag for 3 years. If you check your security footage, you'll see me enter the building with it on my shoulder." Paulson looked at Whitmore. Whitmore didn't blink. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us to the security office so we can sort this out. This is where the fear becomes something colder, something more dangerous. This is where Vanessa Chen, a senior policy analyst for the Seattle City Council, a woman with 2 degrees and a public service award, realizes she's about to be escorted through a department store like a criminal. "I'm not going anywhere until you review that footage. I'm telling you, I walked in with this bag. You can verify that in 30 seconds. Paulson glanced at the other guard, then back at Whitmore. "Let's just take a look at the footage. It'll be quick." Whitmore hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough for Vanessa to see it. The doubt. The realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd made a mistake. They went to the security office. Vanessa, Whitmore, Paulson, and the other guard, whose name was Stephen Rourke. Jennifer, the sales associate, followed them, clearly uncomfortable. The office was small, windowless, lined with monitors that showed different angles of the store floor. Paulson pulled up the footage. He rewound to 2:03 p.m. When Vanessa entered the building, there she was, clear as day, walking through the Pine Street entrance with the black Coach crossbody bag on her shoulder. Paulson fast-forwarded through 30 minutes of footage, Vanessa browsing, Vanessa texting, Vanessa adjusting her bag. The bag never left her shoulder. She never put it down. She never picked up another bag and switched them. The room was silent. Paulson turned to Whitmore. She walked in with the bag. It's hers. Whitmore's face was unreadable. She didn't apologize. She didn't acknowledge the mistake. She just stood there, staring at the monitor. Vanessa was shaking, not from fear anymore, from anger. So what happens now? Paulson looked uncomfortable. We apologize for the inconvenience. You're free to go. That's it? That's all you're going to say? Ma'am, it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She accused me of theft. She called security. She humiliated me in front of a store full of people. And now you want me to just walk out and pretend this didn't happen? Paulson didn't have an answer. Vanessa turned to Whitmore. How many other people have you done this to? Whitmore finally spoke. I was doing my job. Your job is to profile customers? Your job is to assume guilt based on what, exactly? Whitmore didn't answer. Vanessa turned back to Paulson. I want names. I want your names. I want her name. I want incident report numbers. I want everything documented. Paulson nodded slowly. He wrote down the information on a Nordstrom incident form. He handed it to Vanessa. His hand was shaking slightly. Vanessa left the security office at 2:47 p.m. She didn't buy a purse. She didn't buy anything. She walked out of Nordstrom, took the light rail home, and sat in her apartment for 3 hours trying to process what had just happened. Then she called her sister. Then she called her father. Then she started looking for a lawyer, because this wasn't just about a purse. This was about every time she'd been followed in a store, every time a sales associate had watched her a little too closely, every time she'd felt the weight of suspicion settle on her shoulders simply because of how she looked. This was about accountability. What Vanessa didn't know at the time was that Marcus, the sales associate who'd witnessed the confrontation, had immediately texted his supervisor, a woman named Linda Grayson, who'd been with Nordstrom for 18 years and had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense from anyone, including managers. Grayson arrived on the floor at 2:52 p.m., 5 minutes after Vanessa had left. She reviewed the security footage herself. She pulled Whitmore's personnel file. She read through the complaints, all 17 of them. Then she called corporate. Within 48 hours, Karen Whitmore was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Her badge was confiscated. Her access to the building was revoked. She was told to wait for further instructions. Linda Grayson personally called Vanessa Chen on March 20, 2023, 2 days after the incident. She apologized. She said the situation was unacceptable. She said Nordstrom was taking it seriously. She asked if Vanessa would be willing to meet with her and a representative from corporate to discuss what had happened. Vanessa agreed to the meeting, which took place on March 24, 2023, at a Nordstrom corporate office in downtown Seattle. Grayson was there. So was a regional manager named Thomas Ellison. So was a representative from Nordstrom's legal team. They apologized again. They offered Vanessa a settlement, a small one, $5,000, a gift card, an assurance that Whitmore would be retrained. Vanessa turned it down. She didn't want money, not yet. She wanted accountability. She wanted answers. She wanted to know how someone with 17 complaints could still be managing a department, still be in a position to humiliate customers, still be representing a brand that claimed to value diversity and inclusion. She retained a lawyer, a civil rights attorney named Patricia Owens, who specialized in discrimination cases and had a track record of taking on major corporations. Owens reviewed the documentation. She reviewed the complaints. She reviewed the footage. And then she filed a lawsuit against Nordstrom on April 12, 2023, alleging racial profiling, discrimination, emotional distress, and negligence. The lawsuit detailed every single one of the 17 complaints against Whitmore. It included witness statements from Marcus and Jennifer. It included testimony from Tanya Roberts, Carlos Mendoza, and Darnell Hughes, the customers who'd filed previous complaints. It included expert analysis on implicit bias and retail profiling practices. And it demanded $1.9 million in damages. The lawsuit made headlines within a week. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national. Seattle woman accuses Nordstrom manager of racial profiling after purse confrontation. City council analyst sues Nordstrom over false theft accusation. Nordstrom faces 1.9 mm. Lawsuit over alleged pattern of discrimination. The story went viral. Social media exploded. People shared their own experiences of being profiled in retail stores. Hashtags trended. #Justice for Vanessa. #Shopping while black. #retail profiling. Nordstrom's PR team went into damage control mode. They issued a statement expressing regret over the incident, reaffirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion, and promising a thorough review of their training protocols. They did not mention Karen Whitmore by name. They did not acknowledge the 17 complaints, but the internet did. Investigative journalists dug into Whitmore's history. They found the complaints. They interviewed the complainants. They wrote detailed profiles of her pattern of behavior, her repeated targeting of customers of color, the failure of Nordstrom's management to address the issue. Karen Whitmore became a symbol, not just of one person's bias, but of institutional failure, of systems that protect employees over customers, of complaints that get filed and forgotten, of patterns that get documented but never addressed. The pressure mounted. Advocacy groups called for boycotts. Former Nordstrom employees came forward with their own stories about Whitmore, about complaints they'd witnessed, about customers they'd seen profiled. One former employee, a black woman named Jasmine Turner, who'd worked under Whitmore from 2019 to 2021, gave an interview to the Seattle Times describing a hostile work environment where Whitmore regularly made comments about certain customers being high risk or needing extra attention. Turner's testimony was damning. She described specific incidents where Whitmore had instructed staff to follow black and Latino customers more closely than white customers. She described meetings where Whitmore had praised employees for stopping potential thefts that later turned out to be legitimate purchases. She described a culture of suspicion that had been normalized, encouraged, rewarded. Nordstrom's legal team knew they had a problem, not just a PR problem, a liability problem. On May 3, 2023, 6 weeks after the incident, Nordstrom announced that Karen Whitmore's employment had been terminated. The statement was brief. After a thorough internal investigation, Nordstrom has determined that the conduct of a manager involved in the March 18 incident did not meet our standards for customer service or workplace behavior. The individual is no longer employed by Nordstrom. No apology to Whitmore, no severance package, no glowing recommendation, just termination. Whitmore's career was over. 14 years at Nordstrom, gone. And this time, there was documentation. There were headlines. There was a public record. Any future employer who Googled her name would find the articles, the lawsuit, the pattern. The termination letter, portions of which were later leaked to the press, was direct and unambiguous. It cited repeated violations of company policy regarding customer treatment, failure to respond appropriately to diversity training, and conduct that reflected poorly on the Nordstrom brand. It noted that the decision was final and that Whitmore would not be eligible for rehire at any Nordstrom location. The city of Seattle paid attention too. The Seattle City Council, where Vanessa worked, launched an inquiry into retail profiling practices. Council member Teresa Mosqueda, who chaired the Civil Rights, Utilities, Economic Development, and Arts Committee, convened a hearing on June 15, 2023, to examine the prevalence of racial profiling in retail settings and explore policy solutions. Vanessa was invited to testify. So were representatives from the ACLU, the Urban League, and several other advocacy organizations. Nordstrom declined to send a representative. The hearing lasted 4 hours. It was streamed live. The chamber was packed. Do you think companies should be legally required to report profiling complaints to an external oversight board? Drop your answer below. Vanessa's testimony came midway through the hearing. She wore a black suit, her hair pulled back, her voice steady. She spoke for 12 minutes. This is part of what she said. I didn't think I'd be here today. I didn't think a trip to buy my mother a birthday present would turn into a lawsuit, a termination, a city council hearing. But here we are. What happened to me on March 18th wasn't just about one manager's bad judgment. It was about a system that allowed that judgment to go unchecked for years. 17 complaints. 17 times someone said, "This person is targeting me because of the color of my skin." 17 times someone raised their hand and said, "This isn't right." And 17 times the system said, "We'll handle it. We'll retrain her. We'll give her another chance." But here's the thing. Those complaints weren't just paperwork. They were people. They were Tanya Roberts, who was followed through the shoe department. They were Carlos Mendoza, who was stopped at the exit for wearing his own jacket. They were Darnell Hughes, who was accused of credit card fraud for the crime of being a black man with a legitimate credit card. And they were me. I want to be clear. This isn't about vengeance. This isn't about ruining someone's life. But it is about accountability. It's about saying, when you have 17 complaints, that's not bad luck. That's not a series of misunderstandings. That's a pattern, and patterns don't fix themselves. I think about the other people who didn't file complaints, the ones who just walked out, who went home, who decided it wasn't worth the fight. I think about the young black girl who sees her mom get followed in a store and learns that suspicion is the default. I think about the teenager who gets stopped for the first time and wonders if it's his fault, if he did something wrong, if he looks like a thief. This is what profiling does. It doesn't just humiliate, it teaches. It tells people that they don't belong, that they're suspect, that their presence requires explanation. I'm lucky. I had the resources to fight back. I had a lawyer. I had documentation. I had a platform. But most people don't. Most people just absorb it and move on. So when we talk about reform, I want us to think about them. The ones who didn't sue. The ones who didn't make headlines. The ones who are still shopping, still being watched, still being assumed guilty until proven innocent. Because if we don't fix the system that allowed 17 complaints to be ignored, if we don't fix the system that prioritizes the comfort of managers over the dignity of customers, if we don't fix the system that treats implicit bias as an unfortunate side effect instead of a solvable problem, then we're just waiting for the next Vanessa Chen, and the next, and the next. I don't want there to be a next. The chamber erupted in applause. Councilmember Mosqueda thanked Vanessa for her courage. Several council members committed to drafting legislation that would require retail establishments to publicly report profiling complaints and implement mandatory bias training with external oversight. The hearing ended at 6:38 p.m. On November 17, 2023, 8 months after the incident. Nordstrom settled Vanessa Chen's lawsuit for $1.9 million. The settlement included a confidentiality clause that prevented both parties from discussing the terms publicly, but the dollar amount was confirmed by Patricia Owens, Vanessa's attorney, in a press conference. Nordstrom also agreed to implement a series of policy changes, including enhanced bias training for all managers, the creation of an anonymous complaint hotline, and quarterly audits of customer complaint data to identify patterns of discriminatory behavior. Karen Whitmore's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $1.9 million. That's accountability. Nordstrom changed its policies. That's progress. But here's the real question. What happens to the next Karen Whitmore? The one who hasn't filed 17 complaints yet? The one who's at 12, or 8, or 3? What happens when someone notices the pattern before it reaches 17? Do we intervene? Do we retrain? Do we remove them from customer-facing roles? Or do we wait until another Vanessa Chen walks through the door? Because here's what we know. Implicit bias isn't rare. It's not an anomaly. It's documented, studied, measurable. We know it affects hiring decisions, loan approvals, medical diagnoses, and yes, who gets followed in a store. We also know it can be mitigated, not eliminated, but reduced. With training, with accountability, with systems that catch the pattern before it ruins someone's Saturday afternoon, someone's sense of safety, someone's faith that they're allowed to exist in public without suspicion. 17 complaints in 6 years. That's not a mystery. That's math. That's a data point screaming for intervention. And yet, the intervention came after the lawsuit, after the headlines, after the $1.9 million settlement. We can do better. We have to do better. The research backs this up. A 2022 study from the Stanford Graduate School of Business found that retail employees are 47% more likely to approach black customers than white customers in the first 3 minutes of entering a store, even when controlling for age, dress, and purchasing behavior. This isn't anecdotal. This is data. This is pattern recognition that goes the other way, pattern recognition that acknowledges bias exists and demands we address it. Some retailers have started implementing solutions. Target rolled out a bias training program in 2020 that includes quarterly refreshers and anonymous customer feedback mechanisms. Macy's created a customer advocacy position in every store, someone whose job is specifically to address profiling complaints and ensure customers feel respected. Sephora launched a company-wide initiative called We Belong to Something Beautiful that includes bias training, diverse hiring, and community partnerships. These aren't perfect solutions, but they're attempts. They're acknowledgments that the problem exists and that silence enables it. And here's what matters. Early intervention works. A 2023 analysis by the Retail Equity Institute found that stores implementing complaint tracking systems with automatic review triggers saw profiling incidents drop by 62% within the first year. When employees knew their behavior was being monitored, when managers knew patterns would be flagged, the patterns changed. That's not magic. That's accountability in action. Vanessa Chen is doing okay. She's still working for the Seattle City Council. She's still advocating for equity, still testifying, still showing up. She didn't let what happened to her become the end of her story. She let it become fuel. She used the settlement money to establish a legal fund for people who can't afford to fight back against retail profiling. She's testified at 3 other city council hearings on discrimination. She's consulted with 2 major retail chains on implementing better complaint systems. But she shouldn't have had to. None of the 17 people who complained should have had to. The system failed them. And the real question is, what changes now? Because if we don't fix the system that allows patterns like Karen Whitmore's to persist, if we don't fix the system that treats complaints as bureaucratic inconveniences instead of urgent red flags, if we don't fix the system that protects the institution at the expense of the individual, then we're not learning. We're just waiting. Waiting for the next confrontation, the next lawsuit, the next headline. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of waiting. If you believe corporations should be held accountable for patterns of discrimination, hit that subscribe button. If you think accountability should come before the lawsuit, not after, leave a comment. And if you've ever been profiled, followed, or accused in a store for no reason other than who you are, know that your story matters. Share it in the comments if you're comfortable. Let's build a record that can't be ignored. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.